All right, all right, all right, all right. We are back, everyone. You already know what I'm about to say. Super excited to have the next speaker in here. A good friend of mine, Ben Potter, man. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing great, man. Ben, man, just kind of do a quick intro, man. You have Ben has another unique journey, and I'm gonna dive into it too. Um, Ben, man, where you originally from?
I'm from San Diego, California.
And so, like, born and raised there
Yes,
as
sir.
well.
Yeah.
Well, Cali in the building. And Ben, what high school did you go to out there in San Diego?
I went to a charter school called Helix Charter. Very nice. A lot of towards my senior year, actually, we had a lot of opportunities for programming and making things, which is pretty cool. I was a part of developing that, which was incredible. And yeah, did a lot of projects there.
So it's I think just kind of by looking at it, Ben, you look fairly young.
Yes,
How old are you?
I'm 19, so I'm a freshman in university right now.
Watch this, Ben. How long have you been like coding and stuff yourself?
It's been about 8 years. I started at like 10 or 11, depending on who's counting. And I mean, at the time, I had no idea what I'm doing, and that's kind of what the presentation is going to be about. Is we're going to kind of poke fun at some of the stuff I made. But that's when I started, and it's definitely had been an interesting journey since then.
So Ben, when you turn 20?
September.
Okay, so you're 19-year-old. Ben is, 10 years younger than me. Well, over that, but anyway, Ben is 10 years younger than me. Has 8 more years of experience, than I do. And that is one of the exact reasons why I wanted to welcome Ben to the stage. And so Ben is a 19-year-old who basically has, 8 to 10 years of experience, which is in a lot of ways, unheard of. And I would say this is also, a lot of people may think this piece right here is common. I will argue against it. It's definitely not common. Ben is definitely a unique, inspiring, and stuff individual himself. Hopefully, he talks about a particular project that he built for his high school, which is whatever, which is crazy by itself, and stuff. And so Ben has a little short presentation and stuff that he's going to present. And Brand, if you want to bring that up, and he's going to talk about like the importance of building projects, and what you definitely should be looking forward to do as you're going through your journey. And so Ben, man, I'm gonna mute my mic. If you want to turn your camera back on. Can everybody see Ben's screen?
Yeah, do you see this main screen right here where I'm wiggling the mouse? Yes, yeah, it looks like we do. Okay. Camera's back on?
Yeah. Wait. Presentation went back away.
Yeah, it might only be letting me do one, honestly.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
There we go.
All right, man. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Great. So said this is going to be a slideshow, and that's just because I have some funny images and pictures to show from some of the stuff that I was poking around with when like as he said, I was like 11 or 12 when I first started. So what this presentation is I'm going to be talking about how projects can help you when you're learning to become a programmer, when you're learning new languages, if you want to learn something new, how projects can help with that, as well as how projects can really help you build a career, build yourself up, kind of get you started as a professional developer, and how projects kind of play a role in that, as well as some resources available so you can get started in a project if you've mostly just been learning how to code and haven't really worked on something of your own, or don't really know how to start with that. I have some pretty cool resources and like inspiration that can really help there. So to get started, just a little bit of an introduction. I'm currently studying at Rochester Institute of Technology. I am from San Diego, so it's quite cold up in upstate New York. So it took some getting used to, but I'm really enjoying it. And I've been designing websites specifically for over 8 years. I started with just like HTML, basic websites, kind of throwing together stuff. And now I'm doing more WordPress stuff. I just started learning React a couple months ago, really liking the experience there. And I currently do web design and social media on a consulting basis. And I run @coding on Instagram. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. And I love the water. I swim, I surf, and I play water polo. So my journey begins when I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I wasn't allowed to use Facebook because you had to be 13 to sign up. And my parents were like, nope, you can't fake your age. You just can't use Facebook. So I found this site called Facebook for Kids. I signed up. I had a great time on it, honestly. This design looks probably 10 years younger than it does. I mean, like the design's not great, but I mean, I had a great time on this site. I like had a blog, I think. I like just chatted with other kids. It was really cool, but unfortunately it got shut down. Now, I happen to know the manager of this site because I had bugged him in the past and been like, hey, we should be able to do this. Hey, we should be able to do that. But I mean, I was just a user. But I had a lot of feedback. I bugged him a lot. So when he shut it down, I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. How can I make one like this? And he kind of pointed me in the right direction. So here comes my first project, which I called Kid SpaceX. And I'm still quite proud of this design to today. I made this in MS Paint. I think I used like Microsoft's like word art thing to make this the top little banner there. And I mean, it's nothing great, obviously. The UI isn't good or anything like that. But I mean, what's important was I kind of started and I kind of discovered a whole world of programming, because when you said, oh, this is how you start, I kind of pictured I like made a few clicks and I'd be able to just to drag in new features, right? So like I wanted like a points feature. So I was just like points, boop, there, that works. And I mean, unfortunately, things are a lot more complicated than that. So, I mean, I didn't build this site all myself. I used an open source engine, which is very similar to WordPress, called Elg, but it's for social media sites. So, I mean, most of the functionality, login, username, password, create a post, create a profile, that was all there. So when I started, I had this like basically pre-made site where people could log in, talk, do whatever. But I mean, I wanted to make changes, and I had taken like one HTML class before. So I was able to make that layout that you saw before. That I was quite proud of. I thought I was like doing some custom branding. And I mean, as you can see in this upper left screenshot, I got a little bit better design. It looks like I actually styled my inputs in this one and stuff. But I mean, it was clear that I was still learning. But fortunately, I was naive enough, being as young as I was, to still put it out there and share such like an awful looking product today's standards. And I'm really grateful that I did, because if I hadn't worked on this and I hadn't like messed around and had no idea what I'm doing, I wouldn't have been able to make this. So what I learned was how to code, literally, because I mean, I actually made the HTML layout, and I'll get into a little bit more about how I was creating some of the other like more complicated features. I learned customer feedback and how like the user's number one. I ended up getting, I'd say 3/4 of my 5th grade class to use this. My teacher saw that I was on it one day. She's like, what are you doing? And then she was like super impressed and made me present to the class, which was very embarrassing. But it wasn't embarrassing the next day when I figured out that half my class was on the site. So, I mean, I'd get feedback like, hey, Ben, you should do this. Hey, you should do that. And I mean, I also learned some very valuable startup lessons, such as customer feedback is number one. Listen to the customer. If you do something they don't like, they will tell you. And don't code in production. I remember one night specifically, I stayed up especially late. I think I stayed up till like 12 just because I knew people were on the site and I wanted to make sure that I could make changes without like people getting upset, because that had happened in the past. So I like looked at the little activity log. I saw, I mean, this is all like there. It just shows like last post 20 minutes ago. So I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. And then the next day at school, someone was like, hey, I was writing a blog post and it didn't work. So, I mean, I've learned now, or I learned then to create another site where I'd make the changes and just upload them when I was done. This was before I knew about Git or version control or anything like that, but I was still learning some valuable lessons. And last but not least, I learned that open source is awesome, because without open source, I wouldn't have been able to make any of this. I would not have been able to talk to the community behind this project and had their assistance with it. And because open source is so cool, I started contributing to open source. I wanted to edit the header of the site, so I kind of managed to make a plugin. I published it, and I remember I put, please recommend, I am 11 years old, on all the plugins that I published because I wanted extra upvotes and stuff like that. I was, I guess, pretty cocky given that I was creating posts at that age. But it was really cool because I was getting more feedback. People were like, hey, how can you edit this? How can you do that? How can you do that? And I was able to help, and I felt like I was part of a community. And this kind of goes back to the previous talk, which was like, or the 2 talks ago, where it was like self-learning versus online bootcamp. Self-learning is very lonely. Before that, I'd taken like 1 class. I'm like, oh, programming is not for me. I didn't like it. But the second I started working on this project and getting feedback from people, working in like a open source community, getting feedback there, I kind of felt at home, and I felt like I was able to learn from people. And another thing this opportunity gave me was some clients. Right. So, I mean, I was on the community, I was answering questions, I was posting some awful plugins. I kind of shared one of my best looking plugins back there. I had some ones that had even more atrocious homepages than before. But for some reason, people still saw that I could help. So I got some emails. And I think if you look at the bottom left screenshot, that's a PayPal for $13. And I remember that I was so happy to make that $13. And I thought I was overcharging him. I'm like, no way, I'm transferring this site over and he's paying me for it? That's insane. Looking back on it, I could have charged a little bit more. But the point is that because I was working on something, because I was getting my hands dirty, I was able to connect with people who needed help, who were using this, but didn't know how to make their own custom solutions. And I was able to do these custom solutions. So needless to say, I was hooked. I was learning to code by creating things that I was interested in. I was getting feedback from users, and I was even getting paid for it. Which, I mean, it was a pretty sweet deal to be someone who's 11 or 12, feeling at home in this open source programming community, and I'm learning to code. It was incredible. And to get into the how I learned to code a little bit more, because that's a really big question. That's a question I get all the time, is how do you learn to code? And learning style is definitely an important factor here. There is not one proven way to learn to code. For me, the best thing was books, actually. There was a library right by my house. In like the way back, there were these books. They were pretty outdated. I believe it was like 2011, and there was like HTML3 books. I was still learning HTML though. I mean, that kind of explains why I was using table layouts for everything and all that stuff. But I was learning to code from these books. There was a PHP book, which is how I learned how to start kind of messing around in Elg, because Elg was made in PHP, which is the open source thing, as well as the founder of the Facebook for Kids thing. He was very helpful. He always would listen to me. I would have questions. Sometimes he wouldn't answer them right away, but then later on he'd send me a link to a tutorial or something. And I'm like, okay, I'll check out this tutorial. I mean, and eventually I was able to figure out most of the things I wanted to do. There were still a lot of things I kind of shied away from, but regardless, I was working on a project. I was getting stuff done. And online tutorials and other people's code. I would like a lot of times look at other people's plugins and see how they wrote certain things and then use that for me. But I mean, and these 4 things, or yeah, that's 4. These 4 things aren't really the important part, is how I learned to code. You can learn to code a totally different way. But what I think is important, at least what really helped me, was that I was taking what I was learning and I was applying it to projects. These projects really motivated me to keep learning new concepts, where if I was just to read a book, I'd be like, okay, now what? Well, if I was working on a project and I was reading a book because I knew it would help me with the project, for me, that really helped me learn. And programming is really confusing, and it really is. And I'm still confused by it all the time. But my biggest advice to you is to get your hands dirty as soon as possible. After you take a course, after you do tutorial, after like a long day in a boot camp. And that's hard to ask, right? But I would really recommend you kind of start working on a project. And I think eventually the more you're getting your hands dirty in your code, and honestly, the more you don't know what you're doing, eventually you'll begin to kind of figure it out. And I had no idea what I was doing. This did not come natural to me. I was Googling things all the time. I would get stuck on problems that would probably take most people like 12 hours. It was taking probably like 1 hour. It was taking me 12 hours, right? And Googling is extremely important, and Googling really, really helps. And I think an important point is I still don't know what I'm doing today. This was taken from about a week ago, where I was stuck on this problem for about 8 hours, and it turns out I was just thinking about things completely wrong. I thought one way, it's kind of hard to explain because I still don't fully understand it, which goes, I still don't know what I'm doing. But I mean, essentially, I thought one thing was able to hook up like this, and they're just totally separate. It just didn't work. And I mean, I think that's kind of the point. I'm still Googling things all the time, but I think I'm getting a little bit better at Googling now. And I like to tell myself I'm Googling harder questions, even though I have a lot of facepalm moments all the time. And I definitely don't recommend stealing all of your code from the internet or putting things in your code that you don't understand. But I think that if you Google something, it can really help, and it can save you a lot of time, and it will let you use all of the resources out there to solve a problem. And if the answers aren't there, just ask. That's what I would do all the time, is I would ask questions to the online community. I would ask a lot of questions. And it's interesting. I have a friend in university who had a programming problem, and he asked me for help. And like, without even really looking at, like, I looked at the error for like a second, and I literally just Googled it right away. And he asked like for help another time. I did the same thing. He's like, how come like you just don't even try to solve it and you just Google it? I'm like, well, I know the answer is probably there. I hadn't seen the error before, and I just wanted to learn more about the error. There's definitely smarter ways to do it, but I think the most important thing is know that you've got resources available to help you with your problems, and utilize those. And while we're on the subject of Googling, I thought this was kind of funny. I saw this meme a couple months ago. It's just a Google search saying remove child from parent with fork. I just thought it was funny because in programming it means a certain thing, and it can be entirely different. And when you Google things a lot, you can understand how you can just be in the rhythm of searching something and be like, oh, that doesn't sound right out of context. So where do you start? There's not really a proven method. So this is for someone who really hasn't coded before or has done a little bit of coding. There's not really a proven method to like learn how to code. Again, I really recommend using a learning style that like works for you. Try a video, try a course, try a class, stuff like that, and see what works best, see what you're grasping the most. And it's going to be hard when you first start. It's really going to make no sense. But I mean, and this also works for me. I'm not saying it works for everyone, but I would seriously recommend that you dive right into something. Like, don't wait too long to start. I would say even like if you're learning app development, the second you figure out how to put text on a page, you're doing your course or you're doing your tutorial, and then on a separate project, knowing what you know, put text on a page that's going to be the name of the app that you want to make, just like for fun, like maybe your personal app, maybe like, and I'll get into like coming up with ideas and stuff like that a little bit more, but you shouldn't wait to know all the answers, and you should just kind of start building. It's not going to be a good app. Like it might work, it might do the job great, but it's not going to be the best code you've ever written, but that's not really the point. And here's the hardest part: publish it. I'm very lucky that I was naive and I thought my code was good, and I thought that I was making good stuff, which kind of allowed me to publish it without really realizing how awful it was. But you're going to have to do that knowing that there's better apps out there, and just put it out there. It's okay that it's not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. Some of the best apps aren't perfect. I find issues with apps all the time. I find issues with websites all the time. You need to put it out there and get your work out there so that you can iterate, so you can get feedback, maybe so that you can collaborate with someone on it so they can help you with it. So my next advice for a project is to build something that's needed. The to-do list is awesome, but I think that building projects that you're invested in can really allow you to be a lot more motivated by it. And I put needed in air quotes because I'm not talking about an app that you'll instantly get 100 users for the second you publish it. I'm talking about something that you care about, maybe you need or you want in your life, or you have a friend who's like, oh, it'd be really nice if I could turn on my lamp every time a tweet from someone comes out, right? And that's would be a fun project, right? And you maybe would have fun about that, and you'd learn how to hook up into the Twitter API, you learn how to do Internet of Things, you'd learn how to do all of this stuff, and you're interested in it, and you're constantly Googling stuff. Now, I understand this is a lot harder because there aren't tutorials written to like there probably are, honestly, but there aren't like tutorials available to do the app that you're exactly looking for. But that's also kind of the point, is that it's forcing you to get your hands dirty and work in this stuff. And it's very hard. And then these are just some of the projects I worked on. A lot of them aren't actually my idea. It's ideas from like family members or maybe like a friend of a friend or something like that who wants something. And I'm like, oh, I can build that. That sounds fun. And because it's like an idea that has a base, someone you can get feedback in, it really helps, at least for me, create it. So, I mean, I'm going to go on to talk about a project that I've recently been working on, which is @coding. So in 2015, I'd been coding for a while. I normally wasn't really motivated by coding. I was just motivated by creating things. But as I learned more and more about programming, I got a lot more interested in programming itself. And I saw a lot of funny programming jokes, like that fork child one. And I wanted to share them. I also wanted to share some resources that I was learning, stuff like that. So I started this page called Coding Pics in 2015. It had 0 followers. I posted it all the time. I think I'd share like twice a day. I would follow a ton of people, all the stuff that you probably like shouldn't do on Instagram now because you'd get blocked for spam. Well, I did it back in 2015, and fast forward to 2020, I managed to get the username @coding. The person who had it DM'd me, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. I had the opportunity to collaborate with a ton of different companies and software engineers. And Marlon, actually, that's how I met him, was through my program account. He reached out one day, and we started talking. And it's been an incredible opportunity for me to meet people in the industry, make a little bit of money, and more importantly, meet a lot of companies and learn more about the software engineering programming world, right? Because I'm still not a software engineer. I'm a student. I'm still not the best coder in the world, but I'm posting about coding all day. I'm learning about programmers. I'm talking to companies, and it's been an incredible experience. So this kind of goes on to how I got my first job in the tech field, which was actually from my coding page. I was at a conference that, long story short, a family friend convinced me to go to. I was very nervous because I didn't know anything really about, it was a Linux conference, and I didn't really know anything about Linux at the time. But he was like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. So I went, I had a great time. And because of that, I started going to the conference every couple of years, or every year. And then 2 years ago, I had my coding account. I met a company called CodeStream that made a really cool programming tool. I'm like, hey, I've got a coding account. Can I give it a shout out? Can I give your tool a shout out? And they're like, yeah, of course you can give it a shout out. And we're also looking for a social media manager role. Are you interested? And I was blown away that some kid who just had an account on Instagram could get a job at a company. And this was like a legitimate startup. They had a booth at a conference. I mean, it just freaked me out because it was nothing I was prepared for. So I've now been working with this company for 2 years. And the next year at that conference, I actually met another company that was looking for social media management as well. And I know that I'm swaying a little bit away from the whole programming thing, but I mean, this is still something that really, because of my experience with programming, because of my experience with like projects and social media and stuff like that, I was able to get a job doing social media stuff in the tech field. And I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And I've also had the opportunity to work with Pork Bun Domains, and I'm currently working with Built on Dev as well on their social media pages. So I can't stress the importance of projects enough. I'm not saying that it'll get you a job. I'm not saying that it will pay off necessarily, like if it makes a lot of, but I'm saying that projects have a lot of different benefits, and it can seriously help. And when I mean pay off, I'm not saying that like, what I'm saying is like all the hours that you put into a project, you might not make those hours back, but it will give you a lot of experience that is, I would say, is well worth it. So to kind of sum up what I was saying, projects can help you learn to code. It can really help you get deep into language, understand more about it, kind of dive in and work on stuff. It can help you make some money. You can do some client work, some freelancing, which is what I did early on, and I've kind of continued to do. It can help you put your work out there. If someone's looking for a React developer and there's someone who has their own custom donut delivery app in React, I'm saying that's because what I'm building right now, actually. That's kind of the first thing that came into my mind. They might hire you over someone who hasn't really shown that they've worked with React projects really, but just kind of learned the basics of React. And you can meet some awesome people in the field through either open source or just collaborating with people. There's this insane maker community out there where people are just building stuff all day, and they say, hey, I just used my product and teamed it up with this other project, and we created this collab where you can link this account to this account. And And I'll explain that a little bit more, but it's essentially just a really cool community of people creating cool things and talking about it. And it makes you really excited about code, where code can seem extremely intimidating and scary at first. I believe that projects can make code seem extremely exciting, especially when it's your baby that you're working on. And I understand that it takes a lot of time, and I understand that not everyone was a bored fifth grader who missed his Facebook for Kids app, but I would encourage you to work on a project that you enjoy, and I think that will make it a lot more doable for you. So my next piece of advice, and I talked about this a little, is to document. I really think you should be sharing your work out there, even though it's not the best ever. My work still isn't the best ever, and I'm still kind of ashamed every time I post something, because I know that there's a lot better coders out there and my code's sloppy, all this stuff. But I know that if I put it out there, I can get feedback from it. I can iterate. I can just, at least I'm making progress in the right direction. Marlon actually posted, I don't know if you guys know this who are watching, he actually posted on Instagram an 100 days of code series. Well, he's done a few. This is his React 100 that I kind of screenshotted and put up there, just because I had huge respect for him. Whenever I'd go onto Instagram and see a video of him talking about a new React feature or what he worked on, I'm like, wow, that's incredible. He's really putting himself out there and creating cool content and inspiring other people too. And if you want to put yourself out there and you don't really know how, you don't have a good platform, well, I'm happy to help. I love to feature people on my coding page who are working on cool things and need help and stuff like that. And some pretty cool things have spawned out of that. So I'm happy to help in that regard. So kind of to move on a little bit, if you want to try something new, I would seriously recommend using a project as an excuse to try a new language or framework. So, I mean, an example would be I needed to redo my portfolio because it was old and outdated. And I could have either done it in WordPress, which I'd done before, done in HTML, which I'd done before, but I hadn't learned Gatsby yet, and I wanted to learn Gatsby. So it took more time, but it was extremely satisfying because I had learned something new while making something that would normally be boring, such as like updating a portfolio, something pretty exciting. So I think projects is also a great way to do something like that, which is the tasks that you might already know how to make a website. Maybe just try to use a new framework or use something new, just learn a little bit more. And if you want to get clients or commissions, and if you're freelancing, I would seriously recommend creating like projects around a specific niche. So I accidentally stumbled upon like the Elg plugin market. Elg is not as popular anymore, but there's still, if you make a plugin on there, I'm sure there'll be people who will reach out and want to hire you to make something custom. If you're making websites, I'd say to make websites just for a specific thing. So such as like archery firms, or maybe if you are really good at, you know, a lot about like the banking industry, focus on making websites for small banks. And then, well, you've got less clients to choose from, you make your services more appealable to those clients. So I'd seriously recommend that. And then showcase your skills. People will see if you're publishing open source stuff, if you're blogging about it all the time, they'll see, okay, this person's good at that. I want to hire them. And I'm not, again, guaranteeing that a project's going to do all of this. And there's a lot of other benefits besides making some money. But if you do want to do freelancing or do some commissions, I'd say that if I've noticed, at least when I work on projects in a specific niche, I will do a lot better. So that's basically my presentation. I'm going to do questions at the end, but at first I wanted to go over some pretty cool resources that at least I use when I'm feeling kind of uninspired, or I'm like, okay, this project thing sounds cool. I don't really know where to go. I don't think I can do it alone. I don't have an idea for a project, or my project's too hard. I don't know if I can do it. I think these are questions I have all the time. I think these are questions that a lot of people have. And so I created some resources that, or not created, I curated some resources that may help. So number one is Product Hunt. It's, for those of you who don't know, it's a pretty cool site where new startups or just new indie developers will post sites that they're working on, web apps that they're working on, stuff like that. And every day there's a feed of a whole bunch of stuff. So for one, it can be used as inspiration. You can say, wow, these design choices are helping me. This is an incredible product. I never thought Uber, but for, on the spot, Uber, but for farm animals would be a good idea. But now that I see it on Product Hunt, it can kind of expand my horizons for what I think a startup or a product can be. As well as a lot of these people are indie developers who are working on a project and maybe need help. So if you want to help them on a project, you can reach out. And I've seen success with that, where I maybe wanted to make a post on it coding for them, or maybe I'd want to like add a feature and they're like, oh, well, yeah, you can hop on and add that feature. So Product Hunt is really good for that. There's Maker's Kitchen, which is a Slack group of makers, basically developers who love to code. They probably aren't the best coders, which is fine. Some of them are really great programmers. I'm not saying anything against it, but they're people who like to build stuff really quickly. And it's great for inspiration. It's great for learning about the maker community. It's great for finding other really cool resources and tools that you can use to make your idea or to come up with an idea, things like that. There's also this incredible site called firsttimersonly.com. Now, what this site is it makes it a lot easier for people who want to contribute to open source to make their first contribution. Sometimes open source projects are extremely scary. A lot of the times people will think, oh, well, these people are way better coders than me. I can't contribute to open source. So this is a curated list of issues that are basically set for people who haven't really made a contribution to open source or haven't made a contribution to a specific project. It will give them the resources to make the contribution to that project. Finally, there's Twitter. There's an awesome maker community on Twitter. Unfortunately, I have quite a long list of Twitter users. You can send me an email and I can send you that list. I didn't really find it like a way to put it in here, but there's a lot of makers on Twitter, as well as Adafruit is a great tool for coming up with like electronics projects. So if you're less interested in like web design and like app design and want to do more like electronic stuff, they have got a lot of projects and inspiration there. There is NoCodeTech, which is a whole bunch of tools that let you create a project, without coding. It's either like a drag and drop tool or integrations or partnerships, stuff like that that will allow you to create a fully functioning site. People can log in, register, talk, whatever. You can configure a lot of the stuff, but you don't have to understand programming, or you don't have to do a lot of programming. Now, if you've done programming, no code is even better for you, because then you have like a logical mind of a programmer who doesn't have to spend the time working through syntax and all these other difficulties that make coding take so long. But instead you can just build a product. And then finally, there's glitch.com, which is a tool that allows you to quickly just get a web project out there. You can see other people's projects and remix them. There's a pretty cool community and chat where people are talking and working on stuff. A very cool environment for people who are new to coding, or people who want to code something new, or those people who've been coding a while and want to work with other people. It's a very cool tool. So I'm not sure how much time we have. I'll go quick. What I'm working on now is a donut delivery site in React. I made a voice assistant for my old high school. I think that's what Marlon was talking about earlier, where it's like an Alexa. You can ask it questions and it would give you an answer. And I'm currently working on open sourcing it so that my high school computer science program can kind of write features for it. And then maybe that can be a project in computer science class or extra credit or something like that. That's in the makings. Website stuff. I'm making a social networking app in React Native with some kids at RIT. That's been really, really cool. And my social media stuff. So that's what I'm up to now. Just a lot of projects, honestly, too many projects. And I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'd recommend doing one or two things and kind of diving in and doing it. So great. That's it. Thank you guys so much. I've included my email. I know there's going to be the wallet clicks thing as well for you guys to talk to me, and my Instagram and Twitter. So I really hope this helped. I'm hoping we have some time for questions. Let's see. Yeah, we've got a little bit of time, which is nice. So maybe I should be able to answer some questions, but it's definitely an interesting field, and I would totally recommend working on projects.
So number one, Ben, definitely appreciate you being here. I don't want to give you the opportunity to overshadow what you built for your high school. You know, because you just quickly said it like, oh yeah, it's like an Alexa for the high school, and just like ran past it. So real quick, just kind of give and yeah, you remove your well, actually, you know, leave it up. We'll leave it up for your we'll leave it up for the people, but
I think it'll be better. Yeah.
Okay. And we're gonna put up the Wallace's card and stuff too. But real quick, talk about what that does. How did you build it? Well, what it does, and then how did you build it?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And I wish I kind of spent more time talking about that too. You're right. It is a voice assistant, so like a physical device that you would like put on a desk or something, And it's very similar to like the Google Home or the Amazon Alexa, but I called it Scottie because my school's mascot was a Scottie dog. So you would ask it a question like, hey, Scottie, when does this class end? And it would be hooked up to like a class schedule database, and it would answer the question for you. So a little bit about the tech stack. I built it in Node.js, so JavaScript. And a lot of the work was already done for me, fortunately. So Alexa, or Amazon has a voice SDK, which is basically the same voice that Alexa uses. So I didn't have to write like a text-to-speech program. I could just use that. And then Google has a system called Dialogflow that allows you to ask questions and then kind of program in. That was my Google. And then it's able to answer questions based off of certain JavaScript serverless functions that you write. So a lot of JavaScript, but a lot of frameworks too, which made it a lot easier.
So, yeah, you definitely tried to like overshadow and just like run past it. Like, yeah, I just built this, stuff. And, it's fine. So here we're gonna jump into Q&A. So drop a question and stuff before. There we go. We got a few coming in now. So the first question is from Steven. Steven says, how to find balance when writing documentation so it's clear and helpful?
That's a very good question, and something that I'm still learning, because a lot of the times I'm moving so quick that I just want to have something out there, and I don't really think about documenting it, especially because it's only me working on it. But I'm beginning to do a lot more open source stuff, so I'm trying to make it as easy as possible to understand. Unfortunately, I'd say the best thing is to run it through someone, because if I'm writing documentation, I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me, but that doesn't mean it'll make sense to everyone. So I'm also going to, especially since I'm doing more open source projects, I'm going to do my best to create both like text documentation and videos to make it easier for different learning styles to kind of understand how things are working. I don't see a lot of videos with open source projects.
Okay, cool. Next question is from Basil. Man, Basil, I'm gonna have to like write you or call you personally to make sure I'm pronouncing your name right. His question is, how do you get through mental blocks when coding a new language or on a passion project?
I think some of those answers were actually some of the best answers were in previous talks. Taking a break is huge. It's one of the most important things when you're working on something, is just to sit back and maybe go for a walk, and you'll figure something out. Because especially when you're working with different languages, it makes things really confusing. And sometimes you just have to do a course. When I was first trying to do React, I kind of wanted to dive headfirst in and just figure it out. But that didn't work for me. I had no idea what I was doing. So I took a React course. I finished the whole course. And then after that, I started working my app, because I realized that I just didn't understand it, and I needed to get more knowledge before I was making something. So I did a whole course, but then again, I worked on a project and kind of started again,
Awesome. Next question is from Ayib. So how to manage your time as a freelance developer? How do you manage your time as a freelance developer?
That's a very difficult question, because it's very easy to have a client who wants to use all of your time and wants something done really, really quickly, but you have 2 more clients, or you want to work on a project, or you want to do something else, or you need to do something else. You have to go to school or have a family and all of that stuff. So I'd say the biggest thing is just to be upfront with your time when talking to clients and say, hey, this is how much I can do every week. I don't know how that's going to translate into an app, because especially if you're doing it part-time, like I am, I have to be upfront with my clients and say, hey, this is how long it's going to take me. And I'm sorry, I don't know how long that site's going to be, but that's how long it's going to be.
Okay, sweet. Next question is from Adrian. He says, when developing your own apps, do you write documentation?
Yes, good question. I didn't write documentation really. When I was making some of my open source stuff, I wrote very little documentation, or I just assumed people would figure it out because they were smarter than me. Now I do write documentation. It's hard sometimes, especially when you just want to work on the next thing. But yes, I do, and I would recommend it.
Awesome. Next question is from Elena. It says, how do you find freelance opportunities?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Elena. For me, the best way I was able to find freelance opportunities was to kind of niche down, as I was saying, where I would just kind of do work in like ELG plugin development. Well, ELG isn't really as relevant now, but maybe like WordPress development or WordPress payment system development, where you're really just doing one thing. And that kind of makes it sound like you're going to get less clients, but you'll actually get more clients out of a smaller pool because there aren't a lot of people doing that specific thing that you're doing.
Okay, awesome. Like I said, make sure I didn't miss any questions up top. Yeah. I believe that's it. Well, Tom, man, I definitely want to say thank you. You know, you're definitely an inspiring individual yourself. You know, you probably started earlier than most of us who's who's tuning in and stuff. And so we're super excited to see your journey and where it takes you and stuff as well. You know, so final thing, Ben, somebody who is, you know, somebody who may have been learning or may is going to start learning and stuff after this, but they're already interested in kind of building a project. What are some of the next steps that they individually will take to kind of get them going with the next project?
In building a project?
Yeah.
I'd say the first thing, and this is the hardest part for sure, is to, with the knowledge that you have already, start creating the project. Now, if you don't really know any coding yet and you only know wireframing, wireframe the project. If you just know writing, maybe write a description of what the project is going to be. If you just know a little bit of HTML, kind of start out the page. But I mean, I think the more you start and the more work you just kind of put into your project, the more excited you'll be and the more motivated you will be to learn different like tools to make it possible.
Awesome. And we got we got a one last question here. Said Elena again, she said, is there a format for writing up documentation? Are there resources that you can recommend that help with drafting documentation?
There are lots of formats and lots of resources for doing documentation. Unfortunately, I don't do a lot of documentation. I can look some up after this, and because there's a few that I can't really think of. There's some tools that can hook up right to your code and basically ask you to document certain parts of it based on what your code already is. And there's also tools that help you make like very good looking documentation and organize it and stuff for you. So there's a lot of tools out there that make it a lot easier. I don't know any offhand now.
Awesome. Well, Ben, man, again, man, definitely appreciate your time and stuff here. I'm going to throw up the QR code again for Ben, the speaker card, so people can follow up with him. You know, you can email him, you can send him a message and stuff on social media and stuff. So again, man, Ben, thank you so much, you know, for blessing us, and we know with your knowledge and your journey. And until next time, my friend.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.